January 11, 1943, Blackett Strait, Solomon Islands. Water lies still under a moonless sky. No stars pierce the thick tropical clouds hanging over the channel. The only sound is the gentle lap of waves against volcanic rock and the distant hum of diesel engines, Japanese destroyer escorts cutting through the darkness, shepherding a convoy of transport ships laden with troops and supplies bound for Vila on Kalambangara Island. On the bridge of the lead destroyer, Commander Yamashita scans the horizon with confidence. These waters belong to the Emperor. The Americans control the daylight skies, yes, but the night is sacred Japanese territory. They have owned these sea lanes after sunset for 18 months. Their destroyer crews are the finest night fighters in the Pacific, trained in the art of nocturnal combat since before Pearl Harbor. What could possibly threaten them in this absolute darkness? Then, from the blackness 300 yards to starboard, comes a sound that should not exist. The rising scream of 3 Packard engines at full throttle, 1,200 horsepower each, pushing a wooden hull across the water at 40 knots. The sound doesn't register as danger at first. It registers as impossibility. The Japanese had studied their enemy carefully. They knew the American character from before the war, soft, pleasure-seeking, dependent on technology and comfort. They had watched American tourists in Tokyo, seen their cars in their movies, understood them to be a people who required light switches and refrigerators, and smooth roads to function. The Imperial Navy had planned for American battleships and carriers, for their industrial might and their steady, methodical warfare. But they had never planned for Americans to hunt in the dark like jungle cats, to operate where vision failed, to turn the night itself into a weapon. The PT Boat Patrol Torpedo Boat was an 80-foot plywood vessel powered by aviation gasoline, armed with 4 torpedoes and twin 50-caliber machine guns. On paper, it was absurd. A wooden speedboat challenging steel warships in open water. Japanese naval doctrine dismissed them as mosquitoes, nuisances at best. Motor torpedo boats belonged to defensive operations, to harbor patrols, to the cowardly warfare of weaker nations. Real naval powers built real warships. This was doctrine. This was certainty. But doctrine had not accounted for what American ingenuity could do with plywood and gasoline. Lieutenant Commander John Bulkeley's crews had been perfecting their craft since the dark days of 1942 when they evacuated MacArthur from the Philippines under Japanese guns. They had learned to navigate by the phosphorescence in their wake, to read the silhouette of islands against the marginally lighter sky, to trust their instincts and their engines in conditions where their eyes told them nothing. They operated their boats like fighter pilots flew planes, by feel, by sound, by the vibration of throttles under their palms. They had transformed a pleasure craft design into an instrument of calculated violence. The PT boat attacks came in the rhythm of nightmares. First the engine roar materializing from nowhere, then the white foam of the wake suddenly visible 100 yards away. Then the flat, metallic sound of torpedoes launching, a pneumatic gasp followed by the splash. Then darkness again as the boats wheeled away at impossible angles, their plywood hulls dancing across their own wakes. Japanese gunners fired at phantoms, their searchlights illuminating empty water while the attackers circled behind them. The destroyers, so confident in their night-fighting prowess, found themselves unable to track targets moving faster than their gun turrets could rotate. When the torpedoes struck, and they struck with increasing frequency as American crews refined their tactics, the explosions came from directions that made no tactical sense. The Americans were supposed to retreat, to hit and run in straight lines. Instead, they circled, they waited, they struck again. In the after-action reports filed by surviving Japanese commanders, a pattern emerges in the language. The word they use repeatedly is Ariane, impossible. Impossible that small boats could operate so far from base in total darkness. Impossible that wooden vessels could survive engagement with destroyers. Impossible that Americans, who supposedly needed their comforts and their certainties, could master this most uncertain form of warfare. One report from February 1943 notes, with barely concealed frustration, the enemy displays persistence and aggression wholly inconsistent with intelligence estimates of American character. They attack from impossible positions with impossible confidence. The PT boats themselves became symbols of something the Japanese had not calculated. American adaptability, the ability to take whatever was at hand and make it deadly. These were not precision-engineered warships built in naval yards over years. They were improvised weapons built by boat companies that had made yachts before the war, powered by aircraft engines, crewed by reservists who'd been sailing recreationally 2 years earlier. They represented the democracy of American warfare, the idea that ordinary men with ordinary materials could be transformed into extraordinary threats if given freedom to innovate, to experiment, to abandon doctrine when doctrine failed. The symbolic object that haunted Japanese nightmares was not the torpedo or the machine gun. It was the roar of those three Packard engines, the sound of American industrial abundance turned lethal, the sound of automotive luxury repurposed for war. Japan had built its navy with the finest steel and the most rigorous training. America had built its PT boat fleet from plywood and gasoline and had sent it hunting in the dark. By mid-1943, Japanese convoys moved through the Solomons in terror of moonless nights. The predator had become prey. The darkness that once protected them now concealed their destruction. In that transformation lay a truth the Imperial Command could not accept. That war is won not by those who follow doctrine most faithfully, but by those free enough to abandon it when darkness falls.